Hello.
Hello. How's it going?
Not too bad, not too bad. Finally, some sun for Ireland.
Yeah, that's nice. It's getting quite nice here too. So it's kind of hard to stay inside on your computer all day when it's this nice out.
Like, especially here in Ireland, we usually mock about the weather and it's blue sky. So,
Nice. Looks like it's nice in Germany too.
Yeah, it is.
All right, we'll let everyone join real quick. I'll send out the meeting notes. Looks like we have a pretty good agenda, but if there's anything else that needs to be added, please feel free to do that. We can go ahead and kick it off in a minute. All right. And if you don't mind just adding yourself as a participant to the list, would be helpful. And is anyone interested or willing to be the scribe today?
I don't have that much to talk about, so I can do it.
Okay, thanks. I can try to cover your section then too. Perfect. All right, we'll start in about 1 minute then. I guess in the meantime, if anyone is joining for the first time and wants to quickly say hi, feel free, but no pressure if you don't want to.
I guess I'll quickly say hi. I don't know if this is technically my first time or not, and a lot of you already know me, but I'm Dan. I work at Dynatrace. I mainly work on open telemetry. And I'm here to talk about the open telemetry semantic conventions and how they relate to open feature and feature flagging in general.
Nice. Yeah, welcome. All right. Anyone else?
I'm Emma. Hi. I work at DevCycle, and we are picking up a project where we're going to be building a multi-provider. So me and Adam and Jonathan are, well, Jonathan, yeah, well, we're here to talk about that.
All right, perfect. Yeah, welcome. All right. Perfect. I guess we can go ahead and get started then. It looks like Ben's got the first topic, so I guess you're up.
Yeah. Hey everybody. Sorry, let me try and mic.
Let me know if it's a bit loud. Okay, yeah. So my memory is terrible, so I can't recall what was the trigger point for me putting this topic into the diary. I think maybe it would have been maybe some chat in Slack. We have been thinking about, so we Flagsmith have been thinking about this for quite a while, and we have boiled it down roughly to kind of this overall design as far as Flagsmith is concerned. I know there are some providers out there that do this in a slightly different way, like a maybe more powerful, slightly more complicated way. And the idea and the reason actually, so the idea behind this is allowing you to put different contexts through the flag engine at runtime, depending on what your use case is and generally what you are trying to group flag evaluations by. So the canonical use case for this, as far as Flagsmith's customers concerned, is generally like B2B2C platforms. So like, Shopify would be a good example of that. They have customers, which is who are businesses, which is the B2B, and then their customers have customers who are consumers, which is the B2B2C. And quite often they want to be able to group flag evaluations by a tenancy. So that would be like a Shopify store. But then they might also want to be able to do like human specific flags for folk who work within that store. And I just wanted to just kick off like a conversation around ideas for this, and yeah, maybe speak to other providers, see if they've thought about approaching this. We're actually coincidentally literally about to start writing code for this feature in the flag engine, and we've come up with a kind of like a rough example code, which, I mean, well, it's rough. This is sort of like been through the wrangle in terms of design and stuff, but it's come out and we're quite pleased with it because, you know, even though we've spent a lot of time talking about it, the actual code that you're looking at now is fairly readable and quite simple. And that is that by default, you have a single context that you're evaluating flags against, which is the general case for providers. But then if you want to, you can provide an additional context that has an identifier and has its own we call them traits, but you know, has its own like key value pairs of context data. And then we've just added basically an additional you know, method variable for has feature, which allows you to evaluate. So this code would work and evaluate as it currently does within Flagsmith, and then this passing in the context name would evaluate based on the trait data associated with that context identifier. And so what that allows us to do is, you know, in the B2B2C example, in the tenancy example, one of the common requirements from our customers is, I want everyone in this tenancy to, you know, have the same rollout split or have the same multivariate test, or just you know, not have a different experience in this part of the application behavior. So I want to you know, identify them within their tenancy context or within their organization context, and then that way they can be guaranteed a consistent experience within that organization. And so the, you know, in the example of a rollout, the rollout is sort of segmented by in this case, you know, by organization rather than by individual. And so, you know, that you don't have these situations where, you know, 5 people in an organization are getting one behavior and another 5 people in the same organization are getting another behavior, and then, you know, there's a call to support what's going on. So that's the long and short of that. I know you know, naming names, I know Launch Darkly have sort of done a lot of work and made this really front and center in their platform and their SDKs. We kind of wanted it to be more of a, you know, you sort of find it when you do, you know, as a more advanced user, and just curious how this might work as a common denominator in OpenFeature.
I guess my question to you, Ben, is in terms of the design, the API design that you're looking at, the one you just showed, are there levers, gears, and knobs that are missing from the existing OpenFeature APIs, or if not missing, that would be nice to have? Because like I said, I know, and like you said, I know there are vendors who have similar concepts, and I think it totally makes sense. I absolutely understand why it exists, and I think, you know, for us the question is this purely a back-end concern, or is this something that we should surface in a helpful way in the APIs itself, in the specification itself, or even just like in terminology, when we talk about what context is, like our own definitions? How do you see that?
Yeah, I honestly don't know, to be honest. Like, so one of the things that we've been trying to grapple with and get to the bottom of is, you know, sort of how much this feature kind of makes itself known, you know, from the very moment that you start using, like in our case, Flagsmith, right? Like, is it a, you know, is it a sort of like a top level sort of entity and concept, and you know, along with an identity itself, or is it you know, something lower down that? And then when the derivative question with regards to OpenFeature becomes kind of a bit more complicated again, which is like, you know, do we, because there's probably, I could see that there's potentially workarounds that you could apply to the sort of like the provider interface, right? To sort of like not quite hack this in, but you know, like it might not have like SDK ergonomics that specifically talk to this concept. You know, like you know, like we talk about, we seem to get stuck on naming things like a lot within OpenFeature. I kind of find interesting, like way more than other projects that I've worked on in my life. And so, yeah, I guess it's, you know, I guess the question is like, are we happy saying, you know, kind of, yeah, you can do that, but you know, there's a bit of a kind of mismatch between the sort of like the ergonomics of the interface that we provide as OpenFeature and then what's happening in the downstream providers, or do we make that kind of entity a kind of like a top level concern within OpenFeature or not, basically?
Well, if I can kind of summarize, I think what the goals are, like it looks like from your little code snippet you had, uh, essentially like two different contexts that you wanted to pass into evaluation based on like that second argument effectively. And you could do something very similar in OpenFeature. It's just done in a different way. So like this looks like it's part of your initialization, I guess. And then in your second call, you'd be like, would you be passing, would it like merge those contexts, or would it only pass the organization context into that second flag evaluation? You're muted.
Sorry, yeah, the example in this example, the this line of code would only use this data as the
Okay.
evaluation, but it's kind of important to say that these aren't two specifically, these aren't two contexts that are sort of explicitly different from each other. This is like that, you know, all of this data would be relevant to and probably in memory when this user logs in, right? It's just we're kind of grouping them between the, you know, the kind of the human being and then the organization that person's working for and logging in as, right? So then they're not separate, but it's more a case of like kind of namespace in the data so that you can have control over evaluation experiences, basically. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding correctly, like in the back end in Flagsmith, you're basically writing some rules that apply to one set of data and some rules that apply to the other set of data. So some rules are essentially targeting the organization and tenancy rules, and some rules are targeting the user. Is that more or less correct?
Well, yeah, but it's more a case. I mean, it's not the rules themselves. It's more a case of the rules would remain singular and consistent. It's just the data that you're passing into those rule engines is potentially split out between these two kind of different entities that are associated with the session, basically. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I think it makes sense to maybe like audit and see like what would be missing in OpenFeature. I mean, it already has a fairly sophisticated like context like handling strategy, you know, from like the global to the client, and then you can even like do domains. So there's a lot of different options here, and we have to see like do the ergonomics work. My gut feeling is yes, actually, because like if you did that
Right.
as like a client already and you named it something, it'd be arguably easier to work with then, because you would just say like um client would be named organization client or whatever you're, and then you'd know what the context that would be passed in is, instead of like kind of like a magic string here. So I think it just makes sense to kind of audit what we have and see if there's something missing or if we need to potentially think of an enhancement.
Yeah, the other thing I'm thinking too is like you could have multiple fields within your top level context that correspond to these different levels, and then your provider implementation would essentially know how to, in its transformation, know how to handle those to map them into these particular contexts. But yeah, I think I don't know. I think there's a POC would probably be a good thing to do. Like if it once there's like some concept of an API from your end, it might be interesting. Lucas.
Yeah, the last thing that you said was the one that I would wanted also to say. Maybe it would make sense to have some kind of a draft for how you think this could look, if like to be useful to you. Maybe then it's easier to grasp, because I'm still not 100% sure how it would fit in there, and so, and maybe it's good enough if you like draft something, and then we can discuss that in a PR or in a discussion or whatever.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So yeah. Okay. So I guess while we start working on this, we'll look at what a potential open feature implementation of this would look like, right? And how closely or far away they map.
Yeah, I would say, Ben, I would say more providers probably do like the context choosing that you're describing there in their rules engine rather than in their code. Like instead of like the has feature function choosing that, I would say like most providers would like say, for this feature, this rules engine, we're going to choose the organized, like, so you can change the like remotely, like dynamically, rather than having that fixed in code. I would say that's more common than like defining it in the code there. But that's just more my 2 cents.
But yeah, I get that. I mean, I guess that's the design decision. But then there still needs to be a way of like namespacing the contextual data, right?
Yeah. I think how Launch Directly does it is they like the configuration, like the feature flag sort of audience configuration defines which context you're going to select from and which one you're going to target against.
Yeah, and then I think what they do is they use conventions in their context basically to map those different contexts in their provider. But the conventions I think are maybe where I'm guessing where we can do a little bit better. Like we could have conventional namespaces in our context that are more established. I mean, at the very minimum, defined for the relevant provider, but maybe more generally, I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll take that away to the team, and we'll see what a client side and the server side implementation of this might look like with the current API interface that we've got. Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Ben. It looks like it's just the dev cycle team that's up next, so no one in particular, I guess, whoever wants to go first for the multi-provider scoping topic.
Yeah, I think Adam, you're going to go through.
Yeah. Can I share my screen?
Ben?
I won't take too long with this. I just wanted to kind of give a high level overview of what we're doing here. And a lot of you have already seen this document, so okay, can everyone see that? All right, so
just zoom in a bit.
What's that? Zoom in?
Yeah, zoom and enhance.
How's that? Zoom, enhance. Okay, so what we are working on right now is trying to nail down a set of behaviors for this concept of like a multi-provider. So basically like a provider that takes other providers and like uses them together in one sort of unified view from the SDK's perspective. And the reason to do that, there's a couple of them. One of them is that it's like a really powerful way to do migration between providers or from an in-house system that you might already have to a SaaS provider. The idea being that you would go through your code and just replace all of your feature flag calls with OpenFeature while writing a provider for your like original source of feature flag data, and then you would introduce another provider for like the one you're migrating to, and then you'd be able to sort of like with one line of code get the sort of like canonical value of the flag depending on which provider is currently supplying it. And then the other use case is like not just for migration, but also for like maybe you have many providers that like sort of serve different purposes, but are like supposed to always be there forever. So like, for example, you might have like a few environment variable style flags. You might have a couple that are like in a database table. And then you might also have like a SaaS provider doing more complicated like flag decisioning. And so for that, like, it's a really powerful concept to have like one interface to sort of just say like, what is the configuration of this knob in my code, regardless of sort of like where it comes from. And then, yeah, there's other use cases as well, but I guess these are the two main ones that I wanted to call it. And so the basic idea is like you have this multi-provider, you instantiate it with an array of like other providers. We should make these like not provider specific, but they're basically just like a list of providers that are going to be evaluated. And then the sort of like more hairy details are like how do you interact with like the OpenFeature SDK while like aggregating all of the things that are going on in these providers underneath. So one of the most challenging concepts is like how do you decide like what provider to trust for the flag value? And so we kind of have this idea of run modes or strategies is like another name for it, where you basically define like what's the strategy for like trusting or not trusting the results of this provider when I'm sort of evaluating them in the order that they're passed in. So like if you have this array, you're sort of saying like, okay, this might be like my number one thing that I should check, and this might be my number two. So a couple of the run modes that we've come up with so far are first match, where the idea is like you return the first provider that has the flag and doesn't respond with like a flag not found error. But assuming that all of the providers that you've evaluated in order were like working normally otherwise. So basically, if any provider returns an error, you just return an error for the whole operation, because you can't like confidently say that like the provider that returned an error didn't actually have that flag and was just like broken at the time or something like that. So you kind of want to like default in that case. There's also the idea of like comparison. So sort of like making sure that like both or all of your providers are sort of like serving the same value, like they all agree on the same value. So that might be when you're getting to the point of like, I have one provider that should have all the flags for my old provider. I want to make sure that that's the case. So I'm going to keep using the old provider, but I'm going to kind of like report on like every time that the new provider didn't agree with the old provider or something like that. There's another one I'm going to write soon that's kind of like similar to first match, but it's like sort of first successful, where like it's like the same idea except that you ignore errors of providers. So like if a provider is like returning an error, you would just say like, okay, like screw that one, we're just going to like go to the next one kind of thing. And like, yeah, I think there's a lot of different like ways that we could do strategies here, but we're just kind of trying to nail down a few basic ones to start with that like could kind of potentially ship with this as like recommended or like common use cases, and then like maybe try to write it in a way where you could like implement your own strategy. We also had this idea of like in the actual registration of the provider, sort of like defining your own logic of like how like should we use this result or not based on like things. And sorry, the formatting here kind of sucks, but based on things like the resolution details and the original key and the context that was being evaluated, like should we use this result from this provider or not. And so that's the basics of evaluation. And then there's a bunch of other things like how do we like make sure that hooks get run, and like that kind of gets really complicated because you have to make sure that like the before hooks for a specific provider are run against the context, and then that potentially modified context is used for evaluation, but only for that provider, while the original context is used for all the other providers. So currently we're like going with like a system where the multi-provider like runs the hooks for the individual providers itself rather than letting the SDK do it. But yeah, that gets a bit complicated. And then there's some other details about error handling. Like if you do an operation and one of the providers returns an error, how do you like signal that back to the SDK? And I think the option we're going with right now is this idea of like wrapping the like summation of all the errors that occurred during an operation inside of one like unified error and sort of returning them in an array like this. So that would let you, and then it kind of has like which provider caused the error and like what was the original error from that provider. So you'd be able to kind of like log anything that was going wrong with it. I think that's basically it. The main point of this is just to kind of like get everybody aware of that this is happening, and this document is posted somewhere in Slack. I think we might not have posted it in the main OpenFeature channel yet, so we might want to do that. But yeah, we're basically just looking for comments and criticism as we develop this. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I mean, certainly no criticism from me. I think it was well thought out, and I think nice job, guys. Yeah, so if you have any feedback, it is in the notes here, and if you guys, I think it probably does make sense to maybe post in our Slack channel. Could obviously do it this week, but I think there's a lot of people, especially in Europe, that are out this week because of the holidays. So possibly wait until like Monday or something for slightly better traction. But I think that really cool stuff. I think that will help a lot of people. And you can see how complex it can be. Actually, it's kind of like we were sort of naive at first, thinking it was just like you call the provider and call it a day. It's not quite that easy, unfortunately. All right.
My 2 cents here, and I think this is already said during the dedicated meeting for this topic. I really think that this could be added to the included utilities section of the specification that already defines the in-memory provider. It would probably be no dependencies in most implementations. It just uses primitives that are already defined by the SDK. And I think maybe the only change to the SDK proper to support this might be like an additional exception type. Like if we wanted to make that aggregate exception, like an actual first-class citizen, maybe we could do that. But generally, I think you could implement this with just the SDK tools and no dependencies pretty consistently in all of our implementations. And it would be, you know, objectively useful, just like the in-memory provider to lots of people, and not constitute really too much more strict code. So I'd like to see us move in that direction once we have a POC and propose that as an enhancer to that appendix.
Nice. All right. Anything else on that? As we can move on. Perfect. All right. Over to you, Dan.
All right. I added a couple of links into the doc here. I'm here to talk about the OpenTelemetry project proposal for feature flagging semantic conventions. So for those that don't know, the semantic conventions is essentially the way that the OpenTelemetry project defines what telemetry should look like. So if you have a trace with certain attributes, we define the attribute names, what the values should be for those names, metrics that should be generated, and various things like that. The OpenTelemetry project already has feature flagging semantic conventions, although they're listed as experimental and they are very basic. Essentially, it's just the flag key and the flag variant, so that when you generate metrics, you can split by that type of data, or you can query traces for it. And we're looking to both expand that and mark it as stable so that hopefully it can become a little bit better adopted. The reason that I'm here is because when we do these projects, we like to have as much consensus from sort of the industry that we're trying to monitor as possible. So as an example, when we did the database semantic conventions, we pulled in a bunch of people that work on like MySQL and Postgres and like Azure databases and stuff like that. And now that we're looking to do the feature flagging semantic conventions, the OpenFeature project was the natural place to look for sort of industry consensus. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, I added a link to the project proposal and to the OpenFeature blog where we kind of announced the project. But if you're interested, please go over to the project proposal and sign up to work on it. I know that it sounds like a big commitment, but it's really not. It's more just saying, yes, I'm willing to review these semantic convention proposals and maybe try out some of the prototypes and that kind of thing. It's not a massive commitment. We are looking to have a meeting probably once every 2 weeks to talk about the various stages of the project until it's completed. But those details will likely be solidified later. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right.
I have a small question, but is perhaps too early to reply. Actually, one of my first contributions to OpenFeature was actually the .NET hotel hook that adds it was to add the metrics and also tidy up a little bit the traces. And at that stage, I felt that it was more natural, let's say, to have the library itself to have the metrics instead of, for example, hooks. Because in case of traces, you can clearly define more easily, let's say, define traces to, for example, have the history of what happened during the flag evaluation. And I felt that the library itself being, in this case, OpenFeature, providing the traces, logs, and metrics natively instead of hooks. And then if the customer wants to have access to that, he just needs to listen to that specific keywords that as part of the semantics, we will be able to define, okay, these are the specific keywords that we should list, that should listen in order to have metrics, traces, and logs. What's your thoughts in relation to that, or it's a little bit too early for discuss that?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say it's too early. It's a little bit out of the scope of this project because we're defining like the shape of the telemetry and how it's collected is not really an important part of this project. But I would say that the Open Telemetry project in general, the stated goal of the Open Telemetry project is to enable library authors to build in first-party telemetry. The sort of outside looking in instrumentation does work, and there's a lot of it, and that's kind of the industry standard, I guess you would say, at this point, because there have not been a lot of open source libraries to do this, and there have been open source libraries, but they've only gained minor traction, I guess you would say. So right now, most of our telemetry is gathered from these sorts of like outside looking in instrumentations that use like the hook interface, or a lot of libraries have various plugin interfaces. A lot don't, and we do things like bytecode injection to do the collection. Obviously, not ideal. So having a library generate first-party telemetry is, in our opinion, an obviously superior solution. The trick is then that whatever library decides to do that has to take a dependency on the OpenTelemetry APIs, which we understand has its own set of concerns, unless you're in .NET because it's built into the runtime there.
Exactly. In my case, I work specifically mostly on .NET, so that's why for me it was like, should we, what I'm trying to explain, like you mentioned, like first party have access to the metrics. So that's why, I at that time I felt a little bit like it should mostly be part of the library. But again, it's something that we can discuss offline, especially since it's not defined as part of the semantic tag. So
Yeah, so that's a decision for the OpenFeature project to make, and I'm happy to help guide that decision if you have questions. But this project is much more about like, I'm collecting a metric. What should I name it? Should it be a histogram or a gauge? What attributes should I add on here? And that kind of thing.
all right, cool. We will chat more. Don't worry.
Yeah, and please do go over there and sign up. In order to get the project approved, we need to show that we have like an industry consensus and that we're not just trying to drive the roadmap of like one company or something like that. So if we don't get a wide variety of people to sign up over there to say, yes, we'll review proposals, then it may not be approved, and the open telemetry project will move on to other things for now and handle this later. So if you think you even might be interested, please do go over there and sign up.
Sorry, Daniel. I might just not got it, but how is signing up done? Just
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I should have said that. So you can either tell me or you can go over to the project proposal PR, which is linked in the doc here.
Yeah.
And either add yourself to the list of contributors with like a GitHub with a suggestion, or just comment and say, I'd like to work on this, and I will add you to the list of contributors.
Okay. Yeah, I would do that. So I can do that.
Thank you.
Awesome. One thing to quickly add too, so Dan is on the governance committee of OpenTelemetry, and we also have a technical committee sponsor from OpenTelemetry. So if we can get enough like support on our side to help push this thing through, like we should be able to get the approvals and everything on OpenTelemetry, which is actually like Dan had to do a lot of backroom negotiation to make this happen. So let's try to leverage it and get our stuff in, because there's I think a good opportunity here. Cool. Any other questions on that section? Alrighty, mine are quite quick. There are a couple conferences coming up. They're a little ways off, but sometimes you have to prep early just for this. One that I noticed, this was, I guess, a clever ad in GitHub. It was talking about Universe. The call for sessions closes on Friday, which doesn't give people a whole lot of time. But if you do have any interest in giving a talk there, I did link that in the speaker notes. So it's a potentially interesting conference if anyone's interested in attending that one. And then there's a chance that we do like a half day event at KubeCon North America, like feature flag related. It's to be determined still, but CNCF has reached out to see if there's interest on our side in planning that. And I think there is. So it's just a matter of figuring out the logistics at this point. So more to come on that, but if you have any interest, definitely let me know. And we'll try to work through that. That's in November timeframe, so we have a bit of time too. The next one, I'll cover this one for Andrew, but he basically organized this feature flag super stream. If you're around, depending on your time zone, I have a couple of the common ones listed there. But yeah, it's basically in just a few hours. And we're using the OpenFeature like social platforms, but it's through like their StreamYard tool that the DevCycle team provided. So you'll be able to watch it on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter. And you can see like the original like Twitter post thing that Andrew put together, but should be pretty cool. There'll at least be a couple analysts I know that will be there. So hopefully it's a nice way to like also keep promoting open feature and feature flagging to those groups, and hopefully make it into more like analyst reports and stuff in the future, which should help for enterprise adoption. So that's pretty much it, I think, for my section. So any questions on either of those two? Alrighty, over to Todd to bring us home.
Yeah, I should be able to keep this one pretty quick. So we had a meeting earlier this week on tracking events. So really brief overview. Basically, that's to support experimentation and A/B testing in a robust way. Obviously, you have flags that impact user behavior, and often those drive or impact business objectives. However, the business objective, let's say it's a checkout or the usage of a particular feature, may not actually be associated with in the same call stack or the same event or the same HTTP request with the feature flags on which that experiment is predicated. So the idea is we need a way to close the loop between when a feature flag is evaluated and a business objective or measurable business goal pertaining to that feature flag. So we're talking about an extension to the spec that would basically allow us to do this. It doesn't sound like it's going to be something that's very big. And I think that's kind of in line with the API surface area vendors who support this feature have dedicated this feature. It's typically not very big. But really what we're hoping to do is just understand this use case better, understand how we can support this better with the spec, add some API surface area to support this, and kind of bring it home so that we can really have a full featured A/B testing and experimentation solution all natively with OpenFeature, so you don't have to call like the tracking API of whatever vendor you're using. Instead, you can just call client.track or client.record goal or whatever we want to call it. So I basically have a spec PR that's kind of the output from the meeting, which is pretty short. It's just goals, non-goals, and kind of values, as well as an overview. You can see there it's linked in the notes, and I also created a milestone in the spec. So we're gonna have to do some things like survey existing implementations. We'll have GitHub issues for that. We'll have GitHub issues for coming up with some terminology and drafting spec changes. And then probably at least one implementation will go into this milestone. So right now the milestone's empty, with the exception of the description, which is more or less the exact same thing in the spec PR, which doesn't contain any normative sections right now. It just contains basically an overview that describes more or less what I just said. So this is your chance, if you're interested in this effort, to comment on that spec PR and modify the goals as you see them. Add anything I missed, remove anything you disagree with or whatever. But yeah, feel free to add yourself to that spec PR and comment. You can also get a recording of our meeting, which is about an hour. If you want, I'll try posting it in Slack. I think I could put it there. But if you want it, I'll send it to you directly. But it's more or less everything I've put in this spec PR. Any questions on that? Cool. As far as like who's involved here, it's going to be me kind of driving this effort with support from a few other people. Yeah, so we're going to open a Slack channel, and I'll basically post in the OpenFeature channel about that today. You can join the Slack channel if you'd like to just keep abreast with developments. But yeah, I don't think this is going to be a huge section in the spec, and I don't think it's going to be a lot of implementation. I think honestly, most of the work is just going to be surveying and research, and then coming up with consistent terminology and that kind of stuff. But I don't think it's going to be massive amounts of code or anything like that. That's all I got.
Tyler, I have one question. Is there been any consideration made or excluded with regards to like excluding like non-feature flagging platforms to this? Because so for example, Flagsmith integrates with a bunch of analytics providers to receive some of this signal. And so has the decision, like, it feels like that's out of scope for this, but I just wondered whether that had already been discounted or if it was too early for that decision to have been made.
I think it's too early, but I don't think it's out of scope. I think like if I'm understanding you correctly, supporting vendors that don't directly have this feature but use integrations to have this feature is to me important. I feel like that's like definitely a part of what we want to handle. And even like, for example, Flag D, I don't think Flag D is ever going to support this directly, but I'd love to be able to have like maybe an OTel based tracking implementation where you could put metrics in OTel, custom metrics that you use for the same kind of data as like the kind of reference implementation we have. One of the non-goals we have right now is building a backend. We're not going to build a backend. At least that's what we kind of decided in this meeting. Feel free to disagree, anyone, if you want. But I think that we definitely want to make sure that vendors who don't directly support this themselves, but have de facto solutions for this problem are considered. Like I think that's something that we need to do. But we haven't discussed it at length yet, and we want to make sure that the API supports that. So maybe that's like being able to mix in some other tracking vendor into your provider. I don't know what the API looks like. We need to definitely investigate that.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. That's good to hear. I mean, I like, it's definitely a common pattern, I think, for like some of the vendors without, like, or just generally like that's really good to hear.
I just wanted to comment that I think in general there's a lot of cool stuff going on between like the events and multi-provider and OTel integration. I think these are some big rocks that we're all pushing on. So some really good stuff.
Yeah, exciting times. It's I joked about it with Todd at the beginning of the year, but it feels like I don't know, the year of the toggle or something. So good things are happening. So hopefully we can keep the momentum up.
Don't show them any of the AI art you generated.
Oh geez, yeah. It was like a joke presentation at the beginning of the year, and I figured because it was last year was the year of the AI generated image, so it was like this terrible like year of the toggle thing that's all misspelled, but like the logo looks kind of nice. So it's just, I don't know, it just screamed like 2023 AI generated art. At any rate, okay. Anything else? It looks like we're basically through our agenda and near the end of the time anyways. All right. Well, sounds good. Enjoy your day, everyone. And good talking to you. Talk to you later.
Thanks, guys.
See you.
Oh, and join the stream if you can. So see you in a couple hours. Bye.